Dad, this banana is too large. I can't eat everything. Hello, everyone. My name is Ann, and I am currently 24 years old. I live with my father and have been an orphan since I was very small. My mother left me owing to a major illness, leaving my father and me to rely on one another. My childhood years were spent in the loving and devoted care of my father. My dad's name is John. He was both a father and a mother, attempting to compensate for the flaws left by the death of my mother. Life continued in a tranquil and comfortable manner until one awful day that changed everything. It all began when I turned 18. Just joining university was a watershed moment in my life, indicating my maturity and venturing out into the larger world. I recall feeling bewildered when I first left my dear home and my father's loving arms to confront a new life full of hardships. I was a naive girl at the time, unaware of the complexity of love and relationships. My soul was clean and full of curiosity, eager to learn everything new that university had to offer. In the beginning, everything was fresh and thrilling. I made friends from all over, sharing wonderful experiences and memories amidst the buzz and bustle of the lecture hall and the din of the dormitory. There were times when I missed home tremendously. Every time I thought of my father, my heart bled with an unfathomable yearning. My imagination kept returning to the image of him caring for me, sharing stories of my mother on tranquil evenings, his eyes always sad but full of affection. Everything seemed to be going well until that terrible day, a day I'll never forget. That was the moment that changed my life forever. It was not just a watershed moment in my adult life, but it also posed a significant challenge to my beliefs. I was no longer the naive girl who knew just happiness and simple pleasures. That day, I began my path of dealing with difficult emotions and situations for which I was unprepared, but I also met new friends who had recently started university. They were not simple girls like me, though. They knew how to go to clubs, attend thrilling parties, and generally understand boys and girls. We lived in a small dormitory room at school, sharing a confined space yet filled with laughter and many stories. At first, I knew nothing about those things and remained shy and reticent in their presence. However, as time went on, I began to feel myself increasingly dragged into those activities. On Saturday nights, our room was livelier than ever. My friends put on cosmetics and chose their most gorgeous gowns while lively music played. The excitement in their eyes as they looked at their phones piqued my interest, and I was eventually lured into the lively chats about parties and new adventures that made me feel as if I didn't want to miss out. Initially, I joined with the idea of exploring and experiencing something new. The first time I went to a pub with them, I recall feeling a mix of exhilaration and perplexity as I entered a room packed with bright lights, loud music, and bustling laughter. I stood next to them, sipping the cocktail my friend offered me, and I could feel a small bitterness building in my mouth. Such nights became routine over time. I went from being an observer to joining the hectic atmosphere, holding hands with my friends and dancing in ecstasy and limitless laughter. I also learned to drink from them. At first, it was just small glasses, but eventually I was able to swallow the entire glass without fear. I recall the late hours when we came to the dormitory with laughing and weak legs, our tongues constantly repeating hilarious stories. I just had that sense of liberation and defiance that made me feel more alive than ever. I wasn't the same naive person I was when I first started university. I crossed a line that I had never considered, and via the parties, I gradually learned about love, which was before a nebulous concept. At a classmate's birthday celebration, I made a new buddy. His smile and gaze quickened my heartbeat. For the first time, I could clearly feel the genuine vibration of love. Late at night, we exchanged long messages in which we discussed personal tales and future dreams. Love came to me in an unexpected and lovely time. The first year of academic life flew by in the midst of bright and non-stop activities. I realized how much I had changed since I came here. I grew from a modest girl who only knew about studying and basic ambitions to someone who knew infinite joy, the bitter taste of wine, and the passion of music reverberating in my heart. When the first year came to a conclusion, we said our goodbyes, each with our own set of memories and impressions. The dormitory became quieter as our roommates left, leaving home to enjoy their summer vacation. The peculiar feeling of emptiness without laughter, late-night escapades, or long conversations in the dark made me realize how accustomed to that lifestyle I had become, and everything began for me when I went home. When I walked into the house, I noticed my father sitting in front of the television, his eyes fixed on the screen, unaware that I had returned. Seeing that moment, I had the naughty thought of gently approaching and scaring him to make a surprise. I walked slowly and quietly, gradually approaching him. When my hand was ready to touch my father's shoulder and startle him, he spun around, grabbed my hand, and brought me into his arms. "You returned without telling me." His voice sounded warm. We both broke out laughing, with astonishment and delight filling the air. When I asked Dad how he knew I was approaching, he pointed to the mirror parallel to the TV, and I turned around to see why. That mirror had reflected my every move, letting him know what I was planning from the outset. I broke out laughing, ashamed but amused by this discovery. Dad chuckled along, his eyes filled with the warmth and affection that I had long known. After speaking and laughing for a while, I stood up and informed Dad that I needed to retrieve my suitcase and return to my room. He nodded, maintaining a soft grin. I strolled to the luggage area, experiencing the tranquility and warmth of the house, which holds so many memories and reflects Dad's love for me. The afternoon air was peaceful, but not uninteresting, because Dad's presence brought everything to life. That evening, my father and I sat down to eat dinner in the peaceful part of the house. I started talking about my school memories from the previous year. We laughed together and shared humorous stories. He would occasionally smile dryly, staring at me with adoring eyes. At this point, I realized something. My father is now quite attractive. Although he is approaching 50 years old, he still has the body of a young man, possibly because he enjoys exercising, and the heavy daily labor helps him maintain strong muscles. He wore only a tank top which exposed his bulging muscles. At that point, I recognized his attractiveness and strength with a peculiar expression. I stared at him, unable to take my gaze away, and my thoughts got disorganized. My father's crimson voice abruptly interrupted my thoughts. "What are your thoughts?" I was astonished, smiled briefly, and shook my head. "No, I'm not thinking anything." Father and son exchanged happy glances. Father replied, "You've only been in school for a year, but you've changed so much." I nodded, smiling, and replied, "You're all grown up." Dad, that night as I lay in bed, the image of my father's strong muscles appeared in my mind, making me feel confused. I never thought I would have such indelible thoughts about my father, but that image never left my mind. Even when I closed my eyes the next day, the sweltering heat of noon was unbearable. Sitting in the living room, I felt like drops of sweat were running down my back, and no matter how hard I fanned with a hand fan, it was no use. Every gust of wind that blew by seemed to be instantly dissipated by the scorching heat. John, the man I couldn't stop secretly looking at every time he worked, had left home early in the morning to take care of business today and only returned at noon. The suffocation lasted so long that I felt like every cell on my skin was about to burn. Unable to bear it any longer, I decided to step into the bathroom. The water flowed cool, and touching my skin, each drop of water hastily washed away the hot frustrations in my body, making me feel more comfortable. That feeling was so pleasant that I almost forgot everything around me, including closing the bathroom door. Each drop of cool water slid down my shoulders and back. Each wave of water seemed to gently caress, soothing the burning heat in my heart. I closed my eyes, letting that relaxation spread. The space seemed to be filled with only the sound of running water and my steady breathing. My thoughts drifted back to the times I stole glances at John from the window, watching him work. Intently, each movement sure, his eyes focused since entering university. Something in me had changed. The admiration I had for him gradually transformed into an intense emotion that was hard to name. But then a strange feeling suddenly came over me, causing me to open my eyes to the feeling that someone was standing there watching intently. I turned my head and froze when I met John's eyes. He had returned at some point and was standing at the door, his gaze fixed on me through the gap of the half-closed door. His eyes did not blink. His face was frozen in an indescribable expression, a mixture of surprise and something I could not put into words. My heart was pounding in my chest. My legs were stiff and unable to move, and my breathing became intermittent. A tense silence filled the space. Only the sound of running water remained. Each second seemed to stretch out endlessly, and in that moment we both knew we had crossed a certain boundary. The silence was suddenly broken when I spoke, my voice trembling. "Dad, you're back." John was startled as if he had just been awakened from a dream. His eyes sparkled with obvious confusion. He blinked repeatedly, looking around as if searching for an excuse for his presence. His hand tightened on his bag, the strap shaking slightly with the rhythm of his hand. I'm sorry, I didn't think." His voice was low and broken. His eyes looked away, but he couldn't hide the red on his cheeks. We both stood like that despite the stuffy space around us. The sound of water still trickled like a joke, reminding us that we were standing on the edge of taboo. I clenched my hands, feeling the coolness of each drop of water falling to the floor, trying to suppress the vague emotions that were rising. A breeze blew through the half-open window, making me shiver involuntarily. This feeling was both embarrassing and unbearable. He looked at me once more, his eyes meeting mine like an unspoken confession, then turned and hurried back to the living room. The space returned to silence, but my heart was still pounding, mixed with confusion and chaotic thoughts. After a while, I stepped out of the bathroom with a towel wrapped around me, the water still glistening on my damp skin. The misty steam in the room drifted out, mixing with the hot air of that sultry afternoon when I walked into the living room. My heart pounded in my chest when I saw him. John was sitting there, his shirt clinging to his body, drenched in sweat. His eyes met mine for a moment, and quickly averted as if looking straight at me was impossible. No longer the innocent girl I had been, I suddenly felt an irresistible boldness. I smiled, walking closer to him, each step heavy with desire, sitting down right next to him. The distance between us was so close that his breath fanned my cheek. "Did you see everything just now?" I whispered with a half-smile, as if this was just a trivial story. John stiffened, his brown eyes glowing in the living room light, red as fire. His face stretched shy and awkward. He faltered, trying to find the words unsuccessfully. Dad, it's not," he mumbled, his hands clenching the front of his shirt, trying to hide the rising tension. Our eyes met again, and I saw the struggle there, the struggle between reason and emotion. "Don't avoid me," I said softly, my eyes not leaving his for a long moment. The space between us seemed frozen. He swallowed his dry lips, moving to say something, then stopped. We both knew the line between right and wrong was becoming blurred. John took a deep breath, his hands shaking slightly as they rested on my shoulders. "This won't do," he said, his voice low, more to himself than to me, but I didn't let him stop. A strange, powerful feeling spread through my body. His eyes looked at me hesitantly, but there was no clear sign of rejection. I couldn't help myself. My hands reached up and cued John's face. I pulled him closer, planting a kiss on John's trembling lips. The surprise made him stiffen, but not for long. After a moment, I felt his lips respond, soft but passionate. Our breaths mingled, and I knew that the invisible bond between us had dissolved. John no longer hesitated. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me into his embrace with such force that I could feel his heartbeat. The world outside faded away, leaving only us and the sensations of the present. I felt each pounding heartbeat, each surge of heat, as John ran his hands through my wet hair. "I shouldn't have," he whispered one last time, but his voice was drowned by emotion. I didn't reply. I just looked deep into his eyes, where the light of surrender shone. A second later, we were both immersed in a longer, more passionate kiss. All inhibitions and reason were swept away forever. From that moment on, all boundaries between him and me were erased. We rushed into each other without any hesitation, as if the outside world no longer existed. In the following days, the house became our private space where all fears and reservations disappeared every time he entered the room. His burning eyes made my heart beat faster. I clearly felt every rapid breath, every strong movement. He gave as if he wanted to engrave his image into me. At first, the feeling of nervousness and fear of being discovered still crept in, but gradually the passion erased all worries. We lived in a crazy passion. Each meeting was a time to immerse ourselves in inseparable emotions. He knew how to make me forget everything, bringing me to the peak of pleasure that I had never experienced. The house seemed to light up, no longer a quiet place, but a place that witnessed the most intense, passionate moments between us. Days passed by. Every afternoon, when the gentle sunlight filtered through the window, I sat waiting for him to come home. Every sense in me was awakened when I heard his footsteps. The feeling of anticipation made my heart flutter. We didn't just meet in the dark in the mornings. Together our eyes met meaningfully. I knew I was deeply in love and couldn't turn back. We continued like that, holding each other tightly through every moment until I finished college, as if time had stopped, leaving only the two of us to share the burning secrets in that house. And now I don't know if I can go back to the way things were. The life I once knew, once considered peaceful, was swept away by this fascinating relationship. I felt like a person lost in the chaos of emotions and memories. No longer knowing what was right, what was wrong. Looking back, I wonder if I can ever regain the innocence and simplicity of those days, or if the scars of those days will ever follow me. Here is my advice to everyone. Don't fall for the temptations that can come into your life from anywhere, and anyone's moments of impulsiveness may bring you fleeting joy, but the price you pay may be your peace of mind and your future. When you are faced with a crossroads between reason and emotion, ask yourself if it is worth trading the important values you have built and cherish what you have, and think carefully before committing to something that may lead to regret. Don't let short-term moments overshadow the long-term future. Intense emotions can easily make us forget the long-term consequences. The sustainability of relationships is built on trust, loyalty, and sincerity. Every decision has consequences, and the nagging conscience is the hardest to heal. Think about the people around you, the people who love you and yourself. Don't trade your peace of mind for a moment of impulsiveness. Emotions are beautiful things, but they can easily lead you astray if not controlled. Be clear-headed and strong in every decision you make.